Well, hello! Today I'm talking about why you don't need an aquarium filter and what you do need, really. Everyone on the planet, except for like 5 people, would say you have to have a filter on your aquarium, and most people do. They have multiple. They have a canister, a hang-on back, a sponge filter. Can I get one more? Can I get a little bit more? They think it's helping. Now, I'm not going to say it's hurting. In extreme cases, it actually can hurt you. Kind of unpack what is actually going on. So when you buy a filter, you're getting something that moves water. You're getting something that in theory grows bacteria. Might have some chemical filtration going on in there too, and mechanical filtration. So the biggest beef I have is the chemical filtration. Now, in an unestablished aquarium, can be very beneficial. So maybe you've got some activated carbon in a filter that's got like a cartridge system. It's got maybe half an ounce, maybe an ounce of carbon. And carbon will absorb kind of lots of different organics and that kind of stuff. So it might absorb ammonia, which would be kind of useful, right? If you had a brand new aquarium, absorbing that ammonia might save some fish, but it also might delay your cycle. But also would eat plant fertilizer, and it would take out tannins out of the water. That's a good thing, right? But plant fertilizer, not so much. So we've got that chemical filtration going on there. And then you've got the mechanical part, which would be that fine floss. Now, if we've got a lot of debris in the water, and as long as we can get that to the intake of that, it'll get sucked in and it'll get caught there. Maybe that's a useful thing. I think of that as like a garbage can. It's nice to have a garbage can in your house. You can kind of put stuff in there, and then when it's convenient, you take it out to the curb, right? Kind of same thing. We can go and clean that filter whenever we need to, and hopefully we do it before it gets stinky and it's overflowing and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of useful. And then we've got the flow that comes from the filter, and that in a hang-on back and in a canister is kind of meant to do like a back to front motion. So if this is the back of the aquarium and we're pushing all the way to the front, so the water comes out, pushes up, and tries to sweep it back into the intake. Good and bad. If you're just running a stock filter, it's going to suck up a ton of gunk, right? So we're really going to fill up that garbage can, and we're going to sell a lot of trash bags, right? Because you're going to have to change that filter all the time, and that's like buying trash bags. So it's kind of like they were able to sell you like a really small trash can, and let's say a bag that's this big is 10 cents, and a bag that's this big is also 10 cents. And so they're kind of pulling the wool over your eyes a little bit there. So if we're taking the bag out all the time, we're not really growing bacteria. We will grow bacteria on, let's say, the sides of the filter, you know, like where the pad's not, all that slime that you feel in there, that's your beneficial bacteria, right? And so you feel around there going, yeah, there's some, but what we're not thinking about, especially if we're a new hobbyist or we're just have never thought about it, is the fact that everything's kind of slimy in an aquarium, right? So that piece of wood you touched and it slipped out of your hand, that was bacteria that did that. The castle, the fake plant, the live plant, the rocks, the glass sides that we scrape down. So that's one of the reasons why we might not want to scrape down all the sides of our aquariums, is there's bacteria on all the walls, right? And if we get in there and we scrape all the algae and bacteria off, and we do all 4 walls, we might lose quite a bit. So if we know that bacteria is everywhere, it makes having a bacteria in the filter maybe not as important. Now, there are extreme cases. So let's say my 800-gallon aquarium, which you may have seen, if it had no substrate at all, like it was just bare bottom and just had the 4 sides and the top and bottom and no decor in it, there wouldn't be very much space at all for bacteria to grow, right? Like we can imagine an empty box doesn't have a whole lot of surface area. Whereas if we if we have a cardboard box and we fill it full of stuff, everything that's in there has a surface, and so the surface area goes up by a lot. That's the premise behind a filter, is to add surface area, add flow, those types of things. So we can do that with a filter if we put in a ton of biomedia. Maybe we're using rings, maybe we're using sponge, maybe we're using fine filter pads. Carbon, at first we absorb ammonia and we absorb organics and that type of stuff, but long term, if you leave it in there, even bacteria will colonize on that. It'll colonize on literally anything. When you think about it, in your home, you can grow bacteria almost anywhere, right? Same thing goes on in your aquarium. It grows almost anywhere. I don't think you necessarily need a filter. In a perfect world, if you've got all this bacteria in your aquarium and we don't have let's say, toxins in our water like ammonia, maybe paint fumes, maybe perfume, maybe lotion. If that's not in there, maybe we don't need the chemical part of it, right? And if we don't necessarily need the bacteria part of it, what do we need? We actually need water flow. That's the important thing that a filter fixes for most hobbyists that they don't realize, is that you put a filter on, you're gonna get a flow pattern. Even if you have a 75-gallon tank, right? And you put a filter on 1/2, you're at least getting the water to circulate there. And then as fish swim back and forth, they're gonna change the current pattern. And so you'll get some mixing going this way as well. So almost any source of water movement will improve your filtration. The big goal is to not get stratifying layers. Now that's big fancy talk for, we don't want to get the water down low to stay down low. And we don't want the water up top to stay up top. So let's say you've got an aquarium heater in there, and right around the heater it's really warm, right? It might be really hot right around it, but on the other side of your tank it's 2 or 3 degrees cooler because there's nothing moving the water around. Well, something like a canister filter would help that. Imagine if you had the intake right next to the heater, it would pull in warm water, and then if we had the output on the other side, it would expel that warm water. And so you'd get this current kind of doing like a triangle motion in your aquarium to move that water around. So that's one thing that we can kind of wrap our heads around. Let's think about the ammonia. If the ammonia travels the same way, which it does, it's going to be, you know, in our best interest to move that ammonia around and spread it around so that we can use all the bacteria we have on the glass, on the gravel, on the wood, on wherever we've got it. Hang on back or the canister or whatever filter you're running, it's really that flow we need, and that can be accomplished in so many ways. We could use a power head, we could use kind of a wave maker, we could use a bunch of air stones, right, or a big long bubble wall. There's so many people that start with, I have this size tank and I have this size filter, so I'm good, right? You know, if you buy a filter made for a 55-gallon aquarium, there's 55s that are only 3 feet long, there's 55s that are 4 feet long, there's even a set, like it's like a 60-gallon that's 5 feet long. And so if you have it on one end, every foot you're adding onto it, your circulation's getting worse and worse and worse, right? Kind of the same thing when it comes to stocking levels. The more fish you have, the more surface area you might need. So I maintain that for your average, like hobbyist aquarium, maybe you've got a plant or two in there, you've got some logs, you've got gravel, and a moderate stock load where it's not just insane, there's enough bacteria in your aquarium by itself to sustain that. You just got to move all the water around. We can get the same thing going on if we put in big pieces of wood or big rocks. If we don't get the right flow, you can imagine if my head is the hang on back filter and the water's coming out and it needs to sweep back to me, if we put a big old rock right in front and we send that water across the top, it tumbles off the front and hits that rock, it doesn't, there's gonna be a big dead spot right behind it, right? So you really got to look at the way the water moves around your aquarium. Maybe you've got big fish that are moving a ton of water for you. In extreme situations, filtration is very needed and very beneficial, but a lot of people will give benefits to a filter that might not need to be there. They might think like, well, my hang on back brings oxygen in the water. It's like, well, technically that answer is true, but it's not nearly as much as like an air stone would do, or a power head with it's sucking in air and pushing out the air and the water at the same time. That would do a much better job.
We hope you enjoyed this video. We actually picked another one that we thought you might like, so click on it right here.